Hello, everybody, and welcome to Day 3 of the English Australia Action Research and ELICOS Colloquium. I'd like to once again thank our partner for the Action Research Program, Cambridge. And I'd also like to thank all of the participants in this year's program who've been presenting their projects throughout this colloquium. Today, we'll have 2 more projects presented to us. And first up, we have Talia Costa and Geraint Morgan from ILSC in Brisbane, where they're ELICOS teachers, and they're going to be presenting to us about their action research program that explored student perceptions of effective engagement for online and hybrid classes. Over to you, Geraint and Talia.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'll just share my screen and we'll get started. Excellent. Alrighty. So hello, everybody. My name is Talia Costa, and that's my colleague Geraint Morgan. And we are ELICOS teachers with ILSC, and we work at the Brisbane campus. As you can see, it's a wonderful campus. It's a lovely photo there. Lots of our wonderful students, and we focused on investigating the students' perceptions of effective engagement, especially since both Geraint and I spent a long time during the pandemic teaching online classes, as well as multimodal classes such as simulcast or hybrid classes, another word that they're known for during the pandemic.
Thanks, Talia. So hopefully in this little presentation, we will talk you through the context in which our research project took place, as well as looking a little bit at the participants, namely the students who were the focus of the research. Then we'll speak a little bit about the data that we collected, and also thinking about the methods that we implemented to try and see how we could change student engagement in our classes. So that would be the research question and the focus of our project. And then after we've looked at the data and some of the findings, we'll have a little moment where we think about our reflections on the project and any conclusions that we've been able to draw from analysing the data collected. So why don't we kick off by thinking about the context and the participants. Now, Talia, as you mentioned earlier, was teaching a fully online class, and I was teaching a simulcast class. So let me briefly explain the difference between those things. So Talia was online, and all of the students were also online, as you can see in this lovely picture in the theatre mode. So as well as being fully online, Talia had students from different parts of the world. That meant that there were students logging in at maybe 1, 2 a.m. in the morning to start classes, which definitely had an impact, I think, on student engagement. My situation was slightly different. I was doing something that we called simulcast, which some of you may be familiar with. This is where you have students who are physically present in the classroom, and you as the teacher are also present physically in the classroom. And then there is a camera in the classroom that is recording you, streaming live to students who are tuning in at home. Now, for me, most of my students who were tuning in were in Australia, so time zones weren't much of an issue. But as I'm sure many of you will have experienced, the distractions of online classes were an issue. Things like students delivering food via Uber, even delivering people, and still tuning in to try and get their English lesson at the same time. So those are some of the challenges that we faced and some of the context in which our research took place.
All right, thanks for that, Geraint. Sorry, I'm having trouble pressing the right keys. So we focused our research, of course, on the participation just as and the engagement from students, because it was a big challenge for a lot of students. It wasn't just ELICOS that was having the issue. I think when everybody was online, we had the education systems in schools and university were doing the same thing. And as you can see from the memes, we all struggled. So we had very communicative classes that a lot of ELICOS teachers were coming from. And then, of course, the now than when they're online. We're trying to get them to communicate, we're trying to get them to interact, and we're trying to make sure that they are getting something from these lessons. And we were trying to identify these key concerns. That was our first step on what teachers needed to have a look at. And we worked out what online participation looked like. So obviously, as we got more experience and time went on, we started to develop methods that we were putting into our classroom and or our online classes or our hybrid classes to make things better for us, to make it beneficial, not just for us as teachers, but for the student as well, for engagement. So we kind of looked at the methods that we implemented, and they were well-planned discussions. So using facilities of your online tools like Microsoft Teams or Zooms, putting your students into breakout rooms for well-planned discussions. We also trialed using student names, to which some students enjoyed us using their names, others did not. A previous research suggests it can be a little bit confronting. And our school ILSC actually had a mandatory webcam for participation. So that policy was also implemented just to help teachers with monitoring the participation of students. We also did a learning online etiquette presentation that was just shown at the beginning of each session. Now, each session at ILSC is 4 weeks, and usually that's how long a student is with us, for 4 weeks before they might proceed to the next session. So that was shown no matter how many sessions you were at ILSC at the beginning. So our goal was to really determine what methods did students find effective and whether students actually like these methods. So in doing so, we used a lot of surveys. So I'll go on to the data collection because I had an online only class and I collected data over 3 cycles, which were 4-week sessions. So 3 4-week sessions, I collected the data. I had an initial survey where first-time online learners were given a survey that was slightly different from what experienced online learners were given. And then, of course, at the end of the session, I had a final survey for the students. Some of the data that I collected, my EAP class, or my English for Academic class, were Intermediate 1 students. So at ILSC, we call it Intermediate 1, but it's about a Cambridge B1, if that's a little bit easier to understand their English level. So I tried my best to organize questions related to their language level and whether they'd be able to understand it. And this was the results of my 20 experienced online learners. And as you can see, they are quite negative. So the blue section, they kind of strongly disagree with a lot of the statements. You know, taking English classes online has been easy, and they strongly disagreed. But they did think that their English had improved through the experience, which is always a positive thing to have a look at. They said they could not stay focused in their class, or it was difficult for them to remain focused, etc. And as you can see, there seems to be a bit of a negative trend. They didn't get to know their teacher well. They didn't get to talk to the other students in the class. They are motivated learners, however. And so this trend seemed to go on and on and on. So this is our experienced online learners, which contrasted quite differently from our first-time on learners. And these first-time online learners are here, very similar questions, but they seem to neither agree nor disagree. And there's a bit of a trend there where they don't really have too much expectation, but there seemed to be more of a positive expectation for, you know, getting to know their teacher and classmates a little bit. There will be opportunities to practice their speaking and all their skills, etc. So there was a bit more of a positive outcome for these students, a positive expectation, I should say. So having them, this is just a quick look at them side by side. The questions are all very similar. And then we had I had an end of session exit survey. And so this was a combined one of both experiences from first-time learners and, of course, my previous experienced learners. And you can see that it was a very positive result. So it does need to be said, though, you know, there were 30 students in total that did the entry, the the entry surveys, but the exit surveys, unfortunately, I only had about 20 students complete them. So things like that happened. Students were coming and going because of the popularity. Face-to-face was coming back during our project. And so we had students coming in and out of the online classes, but still the results do show that they did enjoy these sort of things. There was something that was making them more motivated. They were able to stay focused in their classes more with hopefully the methods that I was implementing and keeping track of. So there was other pieces of data where I got the students to write how they felt about, you know, how they focused in online classes, what helped them focus. They like the weekly discussion circles. We frequently have these in class. It was part of their assessment, but they think it's very enjoyable, which was lovely to always see. And they also were very positive about other students. So they engaged well with other students and it made them want to come to class a little bit more. They became a bit more of a classroom culture from the result of this. And so they were very positive about the people they got to meet and got to know in the class. Okay.
Thanks, Talia. So let me speak a little bit about how I conducted this. Very similar to Talia, but I think the main difference was the context, in that I had students who were physically present in the classroom, and also I was teaching a different class. As you can see there, I was doing IELTS class. And I think that allowed me to incorporate some activities that are slightly biased towards IELTS, but also the setup of online students combining with students in the classroom lent itself quite nicely to that, which I'll try and explain now. So some of the methods that I used, which I found really helped in encouraging and increasing student engagement, were turning the camera to face the students rather than to face me. Now, if you've never done simulcast, this might be hard to try and conceptualize in your mind, but imagine that you're in the classroom and there's a camera that for the majority of the time is just facing you and the whiteboard, so that the students online can see what you're putting on the whiteboard. And I think that means that the students at home feel slightly detached from the rest of the classroom. And so I found that periodically for open class discussions, turning the camera around so it was looking at the other students in the classroom was very helpful in encouraging students who are at home online to actually turn on their cameras and start interacting with the other students. I think it was useful in allowing them to feel like they were part of the classroom. And that was also demonstrated by when the camera turned back to me and the whiteboard, some of the cameras that had been turned on would then turn off again, which is hard because obviously some learning on the whiteboard needs to happen at some point. But I think having those moments where you turn the camera around is very helpful. The other thing I found useful was breakout rooms, which I'm sure Talia can attest to. Putting students in breakout rooms is really encouraging for them because they feel that there's less pressure on them, I guess, than there is in an open class discussion. And whenever the breakout rooms would close and we'd sort of all come back, a lot of students who hadn't had their cameras on before going in would have their cameras on. And it was clear to me that they were there and they were listening along, but in terms of engaging, they felt more comfortable in a smaller group. And that's when they turn their cameras on and start talking. Now, the picture you can see there, let me explain that a little bit. This was probably one of the most useful things I found in terms of engagement of online students. It was pairing students who were online with students in the classroom. So we used Microsoft Teams, and every student, regardless of whether they were at home or whether they were in the classroom, would have the ability to log into Teams. And so students who were physically present in the classroom would log in, and then I'd arrange the breakout rooms so that students at home would be paired with students who are in the classroom. So this is what you can see going on. One of the students physically in the classroom is talking to a student online, and then in the background there's two students who are in the classroom, and one of them has his phone propped up and there's another student online and they're having a small group discussion. From an IELTS perspective, this is great for speaking activities, and also I found the listening activity. So I don't know if anyone has experience teaching IELTS, but in one of the listening sections, part one, you have to listen to a telephone conversation where you're taking information like telephone numbers, email addresses. And as I'm sure we can all relate to, trying to listen to information over the phone is hard, even in your native tongue. And so this allowed them to practice listening for detailed information and recording names, numbers, addresses, whilst using what was sometimes a slightly dodgy internet connection. So from an arts perspective, that was good. But in summary, I think those were the three main things I found that were really helpful. And then trying to get an idea of how engagement was increasing, I took a slightly more qualitative approach, I think, and would conduct some sort of semi-formal interviews with students outside of class hours just to see how they were getting on and progressing. And thankfully, it was really encouraging to hear that they enjoyed, the moments where they were able to interact with other students online. And it was kind of fun, I guess, in a way. If we can, make learning fun, then that's a good thing. And that's definitely what I found through implementing these techniques. So, conclusions and reflections. Having had a bit of time now since data collection finished and having been able to go over the data and analyze it, I think it's been clear to me that there have been a number of things that we've implemented that have helped to increase student engagement. Like I mentioned previously, the discussion groups that we had with students online and students in the classroom, or in Talia's case, the breakout rooms with students all online, definitely created that sense of community and brought students closer together, which was good. And then some of the classroom culture that was created by making sure that students were on the same track in terms of their learning goals. Ultimately, they enrolled in a language college to try and learn English, and they were working towards a similar goal, even though they were in different places, and creating some structured methodologies that we could implement really helped everyone feel like they were on the same track, I think. And particularly from my perspective, just feeling really encouraged and gladdened by students who were previously a little hesitant to really say anything whilst they were tuned in online in my simulcast classes. Towards the end of sessions, and particularly towards the end of the 3-week cycles, they would be the students who would be actively turning their cameras on and offering answers without me having to call their names and stuff, which was great to see.
Excellent. Yeah, that's right. And in a similar way, we got an overall very positive response from the students, especially when we had discussions with them or the feedback that they gave us. They felt a lot more focused in class and they felt more a part of it, which is something that obviously you feel when you go online. And I think we're all guilty of trying to distance ourselves, like turning off our cameras and meetings, etc. So we're all guilty of it. But when it comes to learning, we do want to make sure we still give them that engagement and that focus, and we help them with their English learning. In regards to some limitations and reflections, especially as we completed this project, it was a little bit difficult, and we've only got to be honest about it just because of the timing of the research project. We had been teaching online and hybrid for so long, and this year suddenly we were all going back face to face. So it was a little more difficult for us to collect the data, but we had smaller and more varied student numbers in classrooms and mixed levels. But of course, we did what we could with it, and it did work out really lovely, which was fantastic. It kind of left us with a lot of questions as well, which is what I absolutely loved about this project. It really made me, and perhaps even Geraint can relate to it as well, kind of reflect on the kind of opportunities I present in the classroom in order to receive that engagement from the students, in order to grab their focus. So what opportunities was I providing for their reading, for their listening, for their speaking, and for their writing? It was always something that I constantly reflect on, even now. So it was always wonderful to have that kind of personal development, I think, as well. Yeah. But what was that? Sorry.
Yeah, Talia, you get.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say another last thing that I kind of reflected on, or we both reflected on, was whether the experienced online learners had more positive online study habits, or showed better results. And I think this is something that people probably look at and research in the future. Unfortunately, it's something that we couldn't analyze in this study, but it was quite obvious that there were learners who worked very well online and others who did not function as well as the others. And it kind of varied. It didn't really matter too much with experience by the look of what I received data-wise. So it left me with a lot of questions with it. I could even say that some of the students who had more experience were a little lazier with their participation and engagement. So it's always an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, that's right. I think you said it quite well, Talia. There's a lot of questions that we still have that are unanswered. So if anyone's interested in Action Research 2023, but also, as you said, Talia, I think it was, doing something like this is super helpful for your own personal reflection. And I think it's been a wonderful opportunity, not only to assess what we're doing in the classroom as teachers to help students, but also what we're doing to develop ourselves personally and professionally. And it's certainly been a wonderful opportunity for that.
Yeah, definitely, I agree.
I think that's
We're all
it.
good there, and you're welcome to ask questions, and we'll have a look. I'll try and find the Q&A box.
Thanks so much, Talia and Geraint. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A. So David's asked if there was any student resistance to the mandatory cameras on. And if so, how did you deal with it?
Absolutely.
And also, sorry, he has one more
Sorry.
part to the question. To what extent did the mandatory cameras on policy contribute to your results, do you think?
So the mandatory policy for ILSC was brought in a lot earlier before I started the project. And it was something that was brought in to help the teachers definitely with engagement, especially with attendance and participation, rather than teachers just calling out to the abyss. During my surveys, I asked them whether they liked this policy, and there was a resounding no. They did not like the policy. However, when asked whether students prefer to talk to somebody with their camera on or off, 100% of the students preferred to have conversations or discussions with a student who also had their camera on. And so because they all preferred to speak with someone with their camera on, especially in discussion rooms, especially in classroom discussion, they would tend to have it on. And it was also them dobbing each other in. The peer pressure is wonderful. Where they're telling each other, of course, oh, teacher, he hasn't got his camera on, and then they turn it on. So it did take a while for the policy to take effect, but for the discussions, students definitely want to engage with somebody face to face, especially during their online classes.
And Talia, what were the consequences for students who didn't turn their cameras on?
It was a little hard for teachers to monitor, but if a student did not have their camera on for an extended period of time, that counts as their participation.
Yeah.
So of course, that means, we're calling out like, hello, are you there? Can you turn your camera on? And no response means that they're not there in class. So, otherwise, students have to have a reason. They'll go, oh, look, my camera is broken. I'll be typing in chat. That sort of is still participation. It's letting us know that there are issues, which we completely understand. Technology fails us time and time and again, but we still love it. But at the end of the day, it's just making sure that they are engaging in some shape or form.
Yeah, I think ultimately the consequence would be an absent mark, right? If
that's right.
For extended.
And they don't respond. Or are there anything else?
Yep. So thank you for that. There's one other question. I love this question as well. Were there any activities in particular that you did to align student goals and help create that classroom culture of engagement? So I guess some examples of the activities that you did in class.
Well, yeah. Well, the weird thing is I kind of put the entry survey is actually called their goal survey. And so it was the goal for their classes. And so a lot of the discussions, because a lot of these students are academic students, so they're EAP. Some of them were coming to Australia to study English, and others were going to Canada to study English. So their goals are already aligned with the fact that they are EAP students. The discussion rooms are always well-planned discussion rooms. So it would start off with maybe a conversation. In EAP, we were talking about trends, for example. So you would have a bit of a discussion. What is a trend? Do they think of any trends? They would suggest ideas. You put them into the breakout to talk about their ideas. They come back and they share the ideas, and then I usually get them to do a writing task on them, a summary of their discussions as well. So it's basically utilizing their discussion rooms for another activity. If they go into a discussion room, they have to come back. It's because they're going to do a reading task, a writing task, or they're going to have to summarize it to the class what their discussion was about. So there's always another step after that discussion. So when you put them away, and sometimes you can't be in all the rooms with the students, once you've put them in there, they have a goal to complete, because when they come back, they need to present it. So there needs to be evidence of what they discussed. And sometimes you can get them to do that by typing what they, summarized in their chat or anything like that. But it's hard to monitor lots of students, of course, but it's always bringing them back in, and then they have like a short summary of their discussion. So it's always that before the activity, during the activity, and the after activity when it came to well-planned discussion rooms.
Yeah, hey, I'll just quickly add something. I think teaching IELTS was helpful in that most students had a common goal anyway. One activity I found, like I mentioned, was speaking, but particularly I'd get students to read through the marking criteria for the speaking test and then try and provide feedback for their partner that they were listening to. And so I think that was helpful in maybe aligning goals, but also in creating that classroom culture, which I think was part of the question as well, because students were really actively listening to what their partner was saying, which I think sometimes they might not do if they think that there's no real end result. But if they were pretending to be the examiner, that really helps them engage with each other and develop that culture.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. So that's it for the questions. But thank you again for presenting. I think your research was addressing a question that was on everyone's minds when they were teaching online during the pandemic about engagement. And so it was really valuable that you systematically researched the question of online engagement as well. And I can't wait to read your report in the Cambridge Research Notes when it's published too.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thanks so much.